I gotta ask you about Martin Luther King. You know who was behind his murder, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, he was assassinated by a two-man hit team from the fire station. Not from the flop house, not from the bushes, which were right below the window for the flop house. Flop house window never opened far enough to shoot a rifle out of it. The bushes weren't the place.
Assassination, as normal, I was one of the ones always chosen to be his personal security. And I was ordered to proceed the same way as in the past.
All right. Who were you working for? Were you privately employed? Were you working
for the Memphis Police Department.
Okay.
And we proceeded to the airport and awaited his arrival. And once he arrived with his body and other persons who met him there, we asked or told him that we were there for security, to give him the same security. I wished I knew now who in his party said we don't want security. Well, mind you now, this wasn't the first time that the party had said we don't want no security. I said, well, I'm here to make sure he gets to Lorraine Motel, and that's where I will see if he get to.
King was supposed to be staying at the Rivermark Hotel, which was the flagship for the Holiday Inn, but they moved him to the Lorraine Motel, which was a whorehouse. It was an hourly rate hotel. It was on the whole track, and it was rampant prostitution in there, and it was what it was. I know that because I knew the owner. And matter of fact, myself and some other people had several meetings with him. He was going to sell the Lorraine Motel, and it was my suggestion to make a museum out of it. And then A.W. Willis drew up the paperwork, and he was a damn good attorney, and he had been one of those who got some of the film that had to deal with Emmett Till's body down in Mississippi out of the state and to the governor of Illinois, along with a lawyer named Russell Sugarman, both of them now dead. But anyway, A.W. finished up all the paperwork, got back to his office, and collapsed and died 4 days later.
We'll talk about the other later. So we proceeded to escort him to Lorraine Motel. And once arriving there, we were met by other plainclothes detective from the Memphis Police Department and my inspector, who was in charge of the security. And he asked the party for the opportunity to offer security for Dr. King. Again, he was denied the right to give that security. We proceeded. He asked then for his men and us to move behind the wall. There's a wall bordering on Mulberry Street that's from the Lorraine Hotel. So we proceeded behind the wall, and he called back headquarters and was instructed to move. Forget it, just move out there. And upon that, I asked him, could I stay in the area and find a location where I could still offer security? Mind you, this inspector had before offered security, not only for Dr. King, but for the president, the vice president, whatever. So he understood security. He said, okay, Joe, do what you want to do. We looked around and found this fire station that had a back door and a window that you could see very vividly with the naked eye, the room of Dr. King and everything within that spectrum. And we set up over there.
The reason people think it was coming from that location was the echo off of the front of the Lorraine Motel. The weapon was an M14 converted to an M21. It was an experimental project. They made 62 of them with an extra barrel. They put a Redfield 3-9 power scope modified by a company known as Leatherwood on it, and they had a suppressor which caused the sound to be modified. They shot subsonic ammunition, which is why they took a head shot instead of a chest shot, which would have been the usual course. And the shooters were most probably recruited from the Marine Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia, which was just across the tarmac from an FBI training academy.
Once we had set up this post, then I thought it was more wise then to not only contact my inspector, but to report it to the intelligence, which I did. And Later on, I think either I or someone brought us binoculars so we could see cars and we couldn't visualize the numbers. And we kept note of person going and coming. And the afternoon went on, and it was time for the speech, his last farewell speech, as we can call it now. And it began to rain, and it rained.
Some began to talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you. But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Well, I wasn't actually supposed to return there the next morning, but I did. Richmond and I both returned back that morning and stayed all the morning until the approximate 2 or 3 hours prior to his assassination.
That person had a problem that Hoover knew about, and Hoover had ordered all audio and visual surveillance of King to be cut off 48 hours before the event in question. And that's who brought him from the east side of the motel, or at least going down to the east side where he was going to leave, back to where he got shot, telling him that some fans of his were outside and wanted to see him.
So was your contingency plan in the event that Dr. King had been killed when you were in the fire station across the street? What was your plan?
Well, the plan was that Richmond would remain at the rear, looking out the window to observe anybody moving. And mine was to go to the front of the building and go north. And the reason I said north from the fire station is because there is no action south, and there is no tall building south of that would be in that location. It would have to be north of. So if anyone who had fired a shot from that location would have to be on Main Street on the north of the fire station.
I was at the trial in Memphis. I want to show you all quickly and explain to you why that jury of 6 blacks and 6 whites after 3 hours came back and found that white boy guilty of conspiring to kill Dr. Martin Luther King. And they went further than that. And they also said there was some co-conspirators, black folks, unnamed, that was involved. I want to show you a little 3-minute clip of the minister that Dr. King was going by his house for dinner. He was due at 7, but they had to move it up because 7 would be a little too dark to shoot somebody. So they moved it to 6 o'clock. 2 years ago at a press conference in Memphis, I get a call. And they said, so-and-so is thinking about killing so-and-so, so-and-so. I said, what? I said, well, he said something at a press conference. I said, put him on the phone. I said, whatever you do, get that film. Because once NBC realized what this brother had slipped and said, we will never get our hands on the film. What you're fixing to see now went into the evidence in the King trial where they brought a wrongful death suit, and I'll explain that to you quickly in a minute. But what you're fixing to witness now is the man who came by to get King to take him to dinner. And 30 years later at a press conference, he slipped, because God do baffle your mind sometimes. You look,
some of the activities are geared especially for the young who did not have a chance to get the feel or to know what the civil rights movement actually was about. Even as they marched, now they could have stopped in a hotel, but when you think about marching from Memphis to Jackson or Jackson to Memphis, there were no hotels. You stayed in churches, you stayed in people's homes, and that's how we got over, that's how we got through. The struggle was a spiritual struggle. You couldn't pay people to do what we had to do. You couldn't pay people to stand before mad dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs and cattle prods. It was strictly a spiritual and moral movement. So we wanted that dimension to be in the pilgrimage to Memphis. We will revisit the mountaintop speech site. That's the Mason's Temple, where Dr. King made his last address, which he almost didn't make, because the night that we were having that rally, there were tornado warnings, and he was behind on the Poor People's Campaign. And he said, you guys go on over and have the rally. I'm going to stay at the motel and work on the Poor People's Campaign. When we got there and Dr. Abernathy walked in and Jesse Jackson walked in and I walked in and others, people started clapping because they thought Martin was behind us. And so Ralph's preacher sense said to him, this is not our crowd. And he went to the phone and called Dr. King. And that any of the marches that we had in those days, you have an opportunity to bring the children and bring the family and march with us. And when I finished sharing with them the last hour of Dr. King's life, oh, hurry. But that gave me the wonderful privilege of spending the last hour on earth. 3 preachers in a room, Abernathy, King, and Kyles. And we spent that last hour together in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel. The press is always curious, and writers, what went on? What did you talk about? I say, we just talk preacher talk. What preachers talk about when they get together.
y'all pay real attention to what you're fixing to hear now.
About 5:45, we walked on the balcony, and he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away, so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out.
Thank you.
I turned around and then knocked him back on the balcony.
Listen. Oh. Wait, listen. Listen. 30 years later, this brother never realized he would slip and say that. Do you know what happened when you're sitting in a jury room about a conspiracy and this piece of film is introduced? He stood here, I stood here, only as I moved away so he could have a clear shot. The shot rang out. This was the brother that he was going by his house for dinner. Now, to my brother Matty, you will have a copy of this tape. I'll get it back to you. And what you should do is make copies. See to it, because this is a very valuable. And y'all need to send this tape to people all over this country.
Eyewitnesses to the assassination say that Dr. King left his room 306 at the Lorraine Hotel just before dinner to get some air. He walked over to the railing at this spot, and noticing some friends below, he leaned over and began to speak with them. Police say 205 feet away, in a window in a flophouse, the assassin waited. He waited, police believe, in a bathroom down the hall from the room he rented but 4 hours earlier. To get a clear shot of his victim, the assassin apparently had to stand in the bathtub, leaning forward to brace his arms on the window ledge to steady his rifle. And this was the view he got. He fired a single shot, hitting his target squarely, and then he ran. Out of the bathroom and along the decrepit hallway, turning, he raced down the rickety wood stairs and out. One policeman said he simply faded. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Memphis.
Just at 8 this morning, Dr. Martin Luther King's body was brought to lie in state for an hour. Hundreds paid their respects during that brief hour. They were old, they were dressed for work, they were middle-aged, with families, young, well-dressed, curious children. But they were almost all black. For some, the experience was just too much. The plane had come from Atlanta bearing Mrs. King. There were police and National Guardsmen at the airport with rifles and shotguns and riot sticks to hold back the crowd of newsmen and spectators. After some delay, the casket was placed aboard for the last journey home to Atlanta.
My second reason is I was more familiar with not only the militant groups, both black and white, but law enforcement officers as well. And I felt my recognition of whoever may have been would be more possible than it would with Richmond.
Mm-hmm. What was your reputation as you view it now? Was Richmond more loyal to the police department than you, or did they suspect you were too sympathetic to Dr. King and the sanitation workers in Memphis?
Well, there were several memos that had been written to the intelligence that I had been encouraging the sanitation workers to stay out. So, and they knew my feelings about Dr. King already. So, I don't know, you add 2 and 2 makes 4 or whatever.
Let me ask you this. Why did you make elaborate plans to trap the assailant should the assassination occur? Why did you seemingly, from this vantage point now, it seems that you put more emphasis on catching the perpetrator after the deed rather than preventing the deed?
Well, again, the possibilities of prevention was out. We've been ordered not to go in the vicinity of or close to Dr. King at that point. So the only thing you do then is, what can I do in order to apprehend the person in case it does happen? Like any good security officer set up plans in order to apprehend any person who may have committed such an act. And that was my only concern at that point. Since I could not be by his side as I had been in the past, then if anything occurred, then at least could be the one who apprehended or try to apprehend.
You were a Memphis police assigned to, at that point, provide surveillance for Dr. King and his party. Right. Prior to that time, you had been providing security, which is to say that you had been very close to him. Right.
So here's what it is, but that's the story of the Lorraine Motel. By the way, the Memphis Homicide Squad for MPD, Memphis Police Department, was adamant that Ray was not the gunman. Ray wasn't even in Memphis on the day in question. But the prosecutor's office was adamant that they were going to charge it. Now, they keep saying self-confessed killer of King. He denied it over and over and over again, and the judge in question, the late Preston Battle, who had the case before I did, said the ballistics tests were inadequate and ordered the rifle retested, but it never got tested. I ordered it retested, and when I had it retested, it was excluded from being the murder weapon. But we found out later that the FBI had been supplied with weapons that were identical in characteristic to what actually did kill King. So there you go. And J. Edgar Hoover, by the way, was a black man passing for white. If you ever see any early pictures of him, there's no question of what he is. And he and his family got run out of Louisiana by the Klan for passing for white, and he hated the Klan for the rest of his life. Wow, we whoopee.
To prevent an attack upon him.
Right.
Now, when you were in the fire station, clearly 100 yards away, you were just essentially spying on him. That was your mission with the police department. Now, what, on the day of April 4th, when Dr. King was assassinated, from the afternoon on, what took place and what was the circumstance and the specifics of your recall from that assignment?
Well, I remember getting a call from some woman stating that we're going to kill you.
Now, this woman had also threatened you at the airport.
Yeah, at the airport also.
The day before.
Right.
Now, did you know her before?
Yes. She's a barber by profession. So I laugh it off, as I always do most this type of thing. Being a police officer, you're going to get those all the time. So I laughed it off. The only thing that went in my mind, how did she know I was at the fire station? To call the number down there. And I guess it was an hour later that Lieutenant Arkin
was one of about 4 or 5 alternative scapegoats. And they picked him for a number of reasons. I did talk to a Captain Tommy Smith, who retired as head of homicide for the Memphis Police Department, who was the first detective on the scene. He said the shot couldn't have been from the flop house because there was a window that he was supposed to have fired the shot out of, and who told me that I never found out. He said, but there was a limb about this thick growing diagonally through the window, and you couldn't even see the Lorraine Motel from that location. He said, I came back with crime scene in about an hour, and the whole tree had been cut down, and I found out there was a cut down order sent out to the sanitation department early that day, but they were on strike, so they weren't going to cut it down.
To prevent an attack upon him.
Right.
Now, when you were in the fire station, clearly 100 yards away, you were just essentially spying on him. That was your mission with the police department. Now, what, on the day of April 4th, when Dr. King was assassinated, from the afternoon on, what took place and what was the circumstance and the specifics of your recall from that assignment?
Well, I remember getting a call from some woman stating that we're going to kill you.
Now, this woman had also threatened you at the airport.
Yeah, at the airport also.
The day before.
Right.
Now, did you know her before?
Yes. She's a barber by profession. So I laugh it off, as I always do most this type of thing. Being a police officer, you're going to get those all the time. So I laughed it off. The only thing that went in my mind, how did she know I was at the fire station? To call the number down there. And I guess it was an hour later that Lieutenant Arkin.
So, you know, it gets back to the show. We're going to start bringing some reality back to television that's not the kind of dysfunctional reality that's so popular these days. We're going to start, you should have gotten this in the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade. You didn't. I know you didn't, but here's what the rule is, and let's see if you can become good Americans because of it. Be brave, be honorable, be forthright, stand up, be counted. See, I always said something bad about this so-called international war on terror. This is just an interesting thing that I did. I said, we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave. What are we supposed to be so terrified for? Hundreds of thousands of Americans have been injured or died trying to secure freedom and liberty. So we're going to give it up because we got slightly scared. Be brave. Stand up.
Look at how I just got max strength generic Viagra for only $1 each from Friday Plans. I thought it might be a scam, but I was wrong, and I need to show you why. I was charged $406 for 9 tablets of 100 milligrams generic Viagra at CVS. $45 each. With Friday plans, I got the exact same 9 tablets of 100 milligrams generic Viagra for $7. That's 87 cents each. Here's how simple it is. Tap the link to go to Friday plans and answer a 2-minute questionnaire. You can select generic Viagra or Cialis and choose any dose you need, including max strength 100 milligram Viagra and 20 milligram Cialis. Every single dose is just 87 cents each. A U.S. licensed doctor approves your free prescription right away. Your order ships free in a plain package and arrives in 3 days. That's really all it takes. Max strength generic Viagra for 87 cents. Prescription and shipping included for free. When I tried it, it worked within 30 minutes. My wife can't stop smiling. She said it's like I'm a whole new man. Don't be the guy who keeps overpaying and risking another failure in the bedroom. I know I'd regret it if I missed out on this 87-cent fix. It's a no-brainer. Get started with...
So they were supplied with the FBI was supplied with 5 XM21s by invoice, serial numbers of which I have secreted around the place, and 5,000 rounds of the ammunition that matched the characteristics of what they pulled out of King's body. That was in late December 1967. King was shot at the beginning of April 1968. The Justice Department ordered the FBI to return the 5 weapons to the Defense Department so they could use them in the NOM. The FBI claimed they lost one of them. I know what the serial number is of the lost weapon. That's the murder weapon. The rifle that James Earl Ray had, which was the only thing that hooked him up to the case, since he never confessed, unlike what the media says, the rate of rifling twist in his rifle was very inconsistent with what they pulled out of King's body. And the rate of rifling twist of what they pulled out of King's body would have required a gunsmith to make up a special barrel. But the Army Marksmanship Unit, which also supplied the Marine Corps at the time, had made up 63 of these barrels that precisely matched the ballistic characteristics of what fired the bullet that killed King. They took a headshot because the velocity of the bullet had been reduced to be subsonic, so the bullet arrived there after the sound instead of the bullet exceeding the speed of sound and getting there first, which is what it is, but that reduced the energy of the bullet. Instead of a 162 grain bullet moving at 2,700 feet per second, which has about 2,500 foot-pounds of energy, you have that same 162 grain bullet moving at 1,100 feet per second, which makes it a pistol bullet with about 380 foot-pounds of energy. So instead of shooting him with a solid torso shot at about 45 yards, which would have been non-survivable with a 30 caliber rifle at that range with soft point ammo, they took a headshot and they almost missed. They hit him in the cheek. It took out his upper right molars, ripped his tongue off, came out between his jaws, leaving the body. If that was it, he would have survived it, but wouldn't have been able to talk too well. It hit his clavicle, deflected along the clavicle under this tough neck skin, went over his shoulder and down across the back, which is not unusual with a rifle bullet. Oftentimes, the victim has a bullet hole here and one straight out back. You think the bullet went straight through him. It deflected around his rib cage, came out the back. So what wound up happening is when it went back in, it wrecked the carotid artery complex on the right. He bled out in about 15, 20 seconds up there on the balcony. Since the wound basically was internal, the blood went inside and didn't spew all over the place. So he didn't die in the hospital. He didn't make it off the balcony. Now, for those who are interested, Jesse Jackson is not the culprit. I advised Jesse Jackson of what I had learned, and he said, we got to get to the bottom of it. Anything I can do, let me know. I talked to Reverend Lowry about it. He said, we need to get to the bottom of it. Anything I can do, let me know. I had told another person who was suspect, he said, we need to let the sleeping dogs lie. And there's another now deceased reverend that Dick Gregory interviewed, and he said, we need to let sleeping dogs lie. And Dick Gregory interviewed him a few months before he died. And Gregory and I talked about it on the phone, and this person was asked by Dick Gregory, why did you duck back in the motel after you had escorted Dr. King out onto the balcony? He said, I didn't want to get shot. That was the recordation. He said, well, how do you know you were in danger of getting shot? Well, I just figured under the circumstances.